Alex.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Looking forward to digging in on a number of things, your background and everything like that, but also and especially the personal token that you sort of pioneered. So with that, Alex, thanks for taking the time, and pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you so much, Jake. Super excited to be here.
So where do we find you today? Is it right? I saw something on Twitter about Launch House.
Yes. So today I am in a hacker house. Actually, it's a mix between a hacker house and a hype house because it is um, engineers, founders, entrepreneurs, influencers, all collaborating and doing projects together on weekends at least in Tulum, Mexico.
So how long have you guys been down there?
So we've been here for a week, and there's 3 weeks left right now. So yeah, it's a full month there, and I quite like it so far.
And before that, where were you coming from before heading down to Mexico?
So before I was in London for the past few months, and then before that I was in Paris. Before that I was in the Bay Area for a while, and then uh, before that the UK, and then I spent all my life in Paris before.
Nice, pretty well traveled for you're pretty young, right? I think I'm 26. How old are you?
I'm 24, so I'm not that young, but I was, yeah, whatever.
24 is pretty young. I still think I'm young at 26, so don't
Yeah.
go telling me 24 is not young.
Nice.
But it's cool. So maybe just weave together some of the pieces for us, like born and raised in Paris, it sounds like,
Yeah.
then spent a fair bit of time in London and came out to the Bay Area, went back to Europe. I don't know if that was like a COVID thing or what. And then now, how'd you get involved with this launch house down in Mexico?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, my quick background is from 0 to 18. I was in Paris. Then I studied business management for 3 years in Manchester in the UK. Then I did a startup for 1 year and 3D printing for an extra year. And so then at 22, I spent a year in Paris where I kind of uh, dived in crypto a little bit, was reading stuff, but I was doing a fellowship of like young technologists. And so it was not directly related to crypto. And fast forward to now, the past year, I've been to the Bay Area for 6 months, and that's when I started getting into crypto. And that was like I think 12 months ago, 13 months ago. And yeah, and the past year has been crazy for me. Ethereum is an amazing community of people. I've done many projects, including the Alex token. Um, and yeah, so it's like very fast background of where I was and what I've done. So yeah, I consider myself a founder, and it's been a year that I launched like products and experiments um, for crypto native on Ethereum, and the Alex token is uh, the one that was the most known by people. But I've done other stuff, and I'm looking to do something next in consumer facing crypto, and yeah, that's like a rough background.
Cool. So you mentioned that it sounded like a fellowship in Europe was what first kind of with a technologist was what kind of first made you aware of crypto. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. So I think so. I did 3 years of studies, and then I did like I failed my first startup at 21 something, and then I just wanted to enter tech, and I thought that crypto was the lowest barriers to entry space. So when you're young and you don't have much funding, or you're not like a PhD in machine learning and things like this is the space where anyone can enter, anyone can contribute and influence, and so, yeah, I started creating a fellowship just to create my network in Paris, really. I just wanted to meet new people. And I'm so grateful because this went really well. We met some of France's most successful founders, VCs. And this is what eventually got me to Silicon Valley because of those connections. And so, yeah, during that time, I did a project in crypto, my first crypto project, which was um, tamper-proof medical prescriptions in an effort to solve the US opioid crisis, as lots of fake prescriptions are there, and it leads to a large number of deaths. And so I did do that, and I participated in this online hackathon called Pioneer.app, and I was very briefly number one worldwide. And so this got me some connections in the Bay Area. Like I went to another fellowship, and from there I was in the Bay Area in a software engineering school funded by a French billionaire that I had just met because of my fellowship. And from there, I decided to dive in fully into Ethereum. Um, and it's been a blast since. So yeah, like this was the year before I joined crypto, created my fellowship, and this is where I started learning more and more. And then summer 2019, so like over a year ago now, is when I started going a bit more full time into the space.
Great. That's there's a lot to unpack there, but I didn't realize, I think I missed in the initial story that this was actually a fellowship that you started on your own.
Yeah. Basically, like in Europe, in the startup scene, there is the family, which is an awesome incubator, and now they're like going remote, and I really like all of them. But they had this program for young people, kind of like the Teal Fellowship, which is like under 23-year-olds. That there's no grant or money there, but you get like coached by the best entrepreneurs, and you learn by doing small projects together. And so I was rejected by that program. And so me and two other friends, we basically did our own program and invited kind of the similar best tech founders, investors in France. And so I created that fellowship. It was in early 2019. And this is where, with the people that I met there, that I recruited for that fellowship that I created, that I did my first crypto projects, and that I then got to meet some people in the Bay Area. I joined another fellowship in the Bay Area. I joined a software engineering school in the Bay Area because of that fellowship in Paris. So yeah, the first that I created got me tons of opportunities that then led me first to move to the Bay Area momentarily, and second to dive into crypto and Ethereum more. So that was cool.
So going back even to like growing up, or I don't know where the seed might have been planted for you, but um, it's pretty unusual for someone to like get rejected from a fellowship, like you said, and then the first thing that comes to your mind, or the thing that you end up going with is like, oh, I'm just going to start my own. That's like a very obviously like entrepreneurial, different way of thinking about things versus most people.
Yeah.
And then now, you see that translating to like many other firsts and innovations that you're pioneering with the personal token and otherwise. Do you have a sense, like looking back, earlier on, where you got this knack for doing? I mean, you just moved to Mexico and like a hacker slash hype house. Like these are all very different moves, and I certainly respect it, and try to do some of that type of stuff myself in terms of like just being different, and not following necessarily the well-worn path. What do you think like started you on this unique journey?
Nice, thank you. Yeah, I know it's 100% clear for me. When I was like 10, 11, 12, I was fascinated by Apple, and I was watching all the keynotes. And so this translated to being a huge fan of Steve Jobs. And I was reading quotes of him every single day. And so I think little by little, day by day, when I was 12, 13, 14, when like I was developing my personality, I was just so exposed to quotes about entrepreneurship, startups, technology being the best thing ever, the most impact you can do with your life, etc. It heavily influenced me. And so at first, I didn't know what to do in life. I just wanted to be Apple CEO. And then I discovered like the founder startup scene, and I've approached it from the crypto. So I chose crypto, but I could have maybe chosen another tech industry. But yeah, this is what planted the seed. And I kind of joke with other like European founders that it's not very the culture of Europe to try new things and be that type of way. And every one of us had a bug in the system, like something in life that diverted them from the traditional path. And so for me, it was just like being a huge fan of Steve Jobs, whilst everyone else is like, fond of other stuff. I just loved Apple.
It's funny, and I'm smiling hearing you talk about it, because if you'd asked me the question that I asked you, I would have said it wasn't necessarily as planned. Like for me, it was really in college that I realized I wanted to take kind of a different path. And after a
Nice.
pretty unfortunate like first year, decided to drop out and start my own company as well. And I spent the whole year reading like Steve Jobs biographies and watching Steve Jobs keynote addresses and things like that. So I totally get what you're saying, and I think we share some of the same inspiration in that
Awesome.
sense. Curious, like from your perspective, you know, when you think of like Steve Jobs and the ways that he's inspired you and like the different quotes that you keep in mind from him, what's like one of the first or you know one of the couple of first things that comes to mind?
So what comes to mind first is I think he's got this quote, which is I think society. I think it's easy to not make noise in life, not bash into the walls too much, but really society is made up by people no smarter than you, and you can influence things. You can change things, and once you learn that, like you're never the same person again. I think this quote really resonates with me and heavily resonated with me when I was young. And what else? And also, I've discovered this like very recently, but some of my skills in crypto is product and marketing, and it does feel like this is what his skill set was as well. So it feels like even implicitly, um, I'm like having the same kind of skill set that he had.
Yeah, and I totally get that. I think like when I think about, you know, sometimes people talk about Steve Jobs, sometimes positively, overwhelmingly so. It's sometimes like pretty negatively. They're like, well, you know, he could have never done what he did without Woz. And so like reflecting on myself, I actually think that like I share some of that skill set, like, you know, trying to be modest. Like I'm not saying I'm Steve Jobs, but it's a similar set of skills, which is like a general like business acumen, a general good taste for nice product and nice aesthetics and a sense for what will work in marketing and what people want, even if they know they don't want it and things like that. And it's tough for me to, you know, actually build a lot myself sometimes because I don't have like an engineering background and I don't know how to code. I took a class within the last year that was like basics of Python, but totally not trained in that world at all. Really don't even have any friends who are like software engineers. And obviously I'm, you know, building a network and over time maybe that'll change. But um, it seems like you do have that technical component as well where you can match both sides, or am I misunderstanding that?
I don't know. I think we share the same experience. I'm European. Like I grew up, people thinking that tech was not a big thing, and like I did not understand that. Perhaps if at 18, if I had to redo my university years, I probably would have studied computer science. And no, I learned business management, which is actually not learning anything at all because it's doesn't give you any hard skills. It like doesn't help me. It didn't help me in any skills in life. Um, and so yeah, it's because also that I'm not that technical that I resonate even more, or maybe that's because of Steve Jobs not being that technical, at least from what I've read about him, that uh, be, I did not become technical at all. Like when I said I was in the software engineering school, that was just because it was a school funded by that billionaire and that they were giving free rent in the Bay Area. That was just a way for me to live in the Bay Area for free. But I was not learning software engineering. The thing is, like, I started, having some little success, some little wins in the crypto space, whilst not having learned how to code. And so then I was like, okay, cool. Like I know so many basics. Like I've learned some basics of Solidity and Python and some languages, but I'm nowhere near a good coder. And I think so far it should be fine. If I pair myself with someone technical, that would be great. And also, I feel like Steve Jobs, like he came to Apple and the hardware computer world where there were so many clunky, slow, expensive, other hardware that was not speaking to the normal population. And today in crypto, this is the case. Today, crypto is slow, it's expensive, it's not scalable. Lots of people are doing things that are technically possible, but that are not useful to normal people. And so I think we're in the same space right now where we need people which are more product minded, more, yeah, like with a vision of like what is useful for the consumers. And it does feel like the Alex token in some ways is like this. It's like, it's super hard to understand DeFi, but investing in someone or betting on someone, that's easier to understand. And it did resonate with a lot of people. And I think, yeah, having an easy message of how the blockchain could practically be useful is awesome. And maybe I took this from Steve Jobs, but I mean, no mean by, I don't want to compare myself, of course, to him, but I'm just saying that the same problem arises every time with technology, and Steve Jobs' wisdom can be replicated also in today's world.
Yeah, and I think, first I compared myself a little bit to Steve Jobs and then had to backtrack it a little bit, and then you just did the same. It's tough. He's like the most successful business person or founder, CEO, visionary of all time. But I don't think there's anything wrong with the two of us both, looking up to him. If you're going to pick a role model, you might as well pick the best CEO of all time. And especially,
Yeah,
I think with both of us, like, I don't think it makes a lot of sense for like a computer science major who started his career with a bunch of tech jobs. Like, he's got kind of a different background of like Steve Jobs, but the
hmm,
way that you're telling your story and the way that I know mine's unfolded, it's like, it's just a different repertoire than like a Bill Gates, for example, which
yeah,
is probably a lot of other people's heroes.
yeah.
Um, do you at all, this is a little bit off topic, but do you at all have interest in kind of the early Steve Jobs where he was interested in like Zen and philosophy and things like that?
Um, so philosophy, I think, into meditation and other things. Um, Slightly, but not as much. No, I would say that maybe I should actually practice more meditation, or I, I didn't read too much about his philosophy. Well, I mean, his quotes and what I resonate with are his philosophy, but I'm not sure what you're referring to here.
Yeah, I think that's most of it. And like he spent, he went a little further where he spent like some of his early days, like actually in India, and things like that. And I was just curious because for me, it's something where seeing him have those, like, I've always liked asking, like the deep questions, the things that feel like they have like a lot of meaning, and the questions of life, which I think to your point, like, they're reflected, his views at least, in a lot of his quotes about like, you can't connect the dots looking forwards.
Mm,
um you have to trust in
yeah,
something, whether it's karma or your heart or whatever it might be. He has a lot of these like life philosophies that I think were born out of this early interest in
right.
just taking thinking about like, well, what do I think of life? Like, not like, well, what religion was I born into? And actually just taking your own perspective and creating your own perspective over time. And I think that to some degree has resonated with me. Uh, but it's something where,
Same.
he didn't end up being a monk either.
Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah, this is great because maybe it was a great balance between, extreme capitalism of starting a tech company that goes to billions of dollars versus, like what to value in life, and, really enjoying every day, enjoying simple things, meditation and stuff like this. It's a great balance. And of course, yeah, like being extremely optimistic about the future of yourself and your career, not knowing what's going to happen next, but believing it's going to be great and things like this. Definitely resonate with this. And this is a huge part of my personality. And yeah, this is funny that it also is for you. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I want to go back to something that you mentioned, like as part of your last answer, and maybe we can move on from the Steve Jobs stuff, though it's been a fun tangent. I think that what you said, related to, well, I won't completely leave him in the past, that related to him, what he was doing with computers, how everything was really clunky, and it just
Yeah,
wasn't a technology that was very useful to a large number of people. It was useful within a very specific niche. And I think, like you said, we're seeing that with crypto today, where,
yeah,
there's a number of people who understand Bitcoin and are invested in Bitcoin. And it doesn't go like a whole lot further than that. It doesn't even go to that level, but for a very small number of the population, whereas, or a percentage of the population, whereas, the vision that people within crypto have for crypto is along the lines of what computers later became, or what the internet later became, where the internet as well just started as something super small for people in a very specific area of interest. And so we're like a decade in now to this, a decade since Bitcoin was created. And it's very early. And like, neither of us are old enough to really appreciate those other evolutions, at least not from lived experience. But you hear people comparing this to like the internet in the 90s, like when we were born. And it's just hard to imagine what it was like back then, because we only know, what it was like as we grew up. And so I think it was a really good point that you made on like bringing useful and obvious cases that are easy for people to engage with. And with that, I think that your idea of like, you basically made a coin for yourself called the Alex coin. And that was something that I've been thinking about for a while. Just one application that I think is super practical and like tangible for people. So how did that kind of come to be?
So, okay. So the Alex story, how did it come to be? Well, it started, so the long version or the short version?
Always the long version on this one.
Okay, cool. So the long version is, so I did my fellowship, and like I met this billionaire founder in France, super successful, and like he has this free software engineering school that pays for your rent. And so I was young and not very wealthy, and so I went to the Bay Area in the Bay to study. I mean, just to live and network and like learn about crypto. And I really wanted to be at that Ethereum conference that was happening in August 2019 that year. And I was not really in crypto at the time. I was just like still learning about it. And I just do one tweet, which is, if I had unlimited money, I would make it to Berlin Blockchain Week next week. But that was a joke. Like I never expect anything from it. And like a stranger, a 19-year-old stranger just sends me $1,500 so that I can make it on a 5 days notice to Berlin. And so I find this incredible. And this is not just me. This is a ton of people in the Ethereum community who just like got a gift from someone to make it to that industry, because everyone is so positive sum. When you build an application, you benefit from it, etc. And so I come to Berlin like with the money of a stranger I never met in my life.
So just to butt in there, so you basically send this tweet and the kid just DMs you and sends you $1,500 of Bitcoin?
Of DAI, which is like stable dollars.
Yeah.
And so I was like, wow, this is insane. Like now I have to go. So I booked my flights literally for 5 days later. I go to Berlin, and in Berlin, like I discovered that, so this person is Peter Pan. He is an amazing community member of Ethereum. He has a VC fund now that is the first VC fund to also be a DAO. So it's like a LLC in the USA whose code is on the Ethereum blockchain. So it's incredible. I think there's like a few $1 million, and it's been investing in some of the best startups in the space. And so that person tells me, hey, do you want to help out MetaCartel, which is the name of that community? And he was like, but I'm not very wealthy, so I would like to tokenize the debt that you owe me, the $1,500. We're going to create a token called Alex Masmej Loan 2019. And we're going to create 1,500 of them, one per dollar that I lent you. And in a year, you're going to give $1.1 to each token holder. So that means like I'm going to pay a 10% debt. And so what this process meant is that people can now buy the debt from Peter Pan. And so he gets the money back, but I don't have to pay him straight away. I will pay him in a year. I will pay in a year whoever holds the token. So it's like a very cool use case of like debt token, I guess, that was backed by my reputation. And that was my first token. So Alex Masmej Loan 2019. And so then there's this company called Roll, which is like one of the main personal token issuer company that comes to me and say, hey, we're just getting started. Like we've been talking to people like about doing that personal token, and you've done it yourself. Like that's incredible. Do you want to create your own token? And I was like, sure. And we called it the Alex token. And that was back in September, I would say 2019. And for a few months, nothing really happened with that token. I think the use cases we thought of was 1 hour of my time for X number of token, but no one didn't really care about this because I was not known enough to like have my time being monetized. which funnily enough, now I do. I'm on Super Peer just like you are, Jake, which is funny. But at the time, no one really cared. And so what happened is in March, COVID happened. And long story short, like I've done a few projects between like August and March, and my project at the time was like successful. Like it was pretty nice, to be honest. Like I was quite proud, but it was not something that I thought would be a serious company. And so during that time, I was like, okay, I'm much like with COVID, like I got one of my income like cut, which was like a marketing job at like a crypto company. That was just like a few hours a week. That was super cool. I was like living like my life, doing whatever I wanted and like getting paid on the side. So that was great. And so that income was cut. And it was March this year, which is ECC, which is the like European conference in France that's happening every year in Paris. And because I'm French, I was speaking on main stage about personal tokens. And so I was like, wow, this is a huge opportunity to maybe announce something with the Alex token, because I'll be speaking in front of lots of people and, you know, I'm not sure what to do with COVID. So maybe let's try something. And at the time, even though COVID happened, I was very determined to make it to the US. At the time, like the borders were still open. So I thought it was okay, but turns out that now I'm not in the US still because of this. But like, yeah, I just announced at the conference, hey, I'm going to raise $20,000 with an income sharing agreement where I will give 15% of my income for the next 3 years to people who buy into that $20,000 raise. And I thought I would do that in 2 weeks, but like in 2-3 days, the sale was closed and it was oversubscribed and I was super happy. And then some media picked it up. And then like, I've got other stories to share with the Alex token, but like that was the initial story of how it came about.
It's an awesome story. Like I mentioned, this was an idea that was really intriguing to me. I want to like ask a couple questions about the story itself, and then talk more about like what you're doing with the Alex token. But you mentioned you got flown out to that conference, or you got the $1,500 to get flown out. Just like a clarifying thing, did you know that was? It sounds like that basically ended up being a loan more than like a gift. Was that?
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, at the time he was like interest free. That person was like, "Oh, do you want to get it interest free?" And then at that conference, it turns out like he wanted to get paid sooner, and he was like, to incentivize people to buy my debt, I'd like an interest rate of 10%. And I was like, fine, that's okay.
Yeah, it's a little. I don't know if you're still like if you have a relationship with this guy, but it's a little bit sketchy sounding to me. Like it's great that you get this gift, and it's like seems too good to be true, and then it sounds like to some extent, obviously you're probably happy with the outcome. Ended up putting you on this path where you ended up doing this personal token, and it worked out great for you. But on the other side, it's like, don't give me a gift of $1,500 if you're gonna then tell me it's like has interest on it and you need it back in a year.
True. Yeah.
And it's interesting because like I haven't heard a story obviously exactly like that, but there is this sketchy / scammy reputation within crypto because early use cases were around like drug dealing and nefarious activities with Silk Road and everything like that. And I try to tell people like that's dollars are used to buy and sell cocaine all the time. Like every form of money, if it works, it's going to be used for bad stuff. And yeah. Bitcoin might be like especially attractive at this early stage for things like that. But at the same time, if a money is only used for bad things, it loses its value for anyone not engaged with those bad things, and it's not really going to work in the end. So it's not like, if crypto is only being used for nefarious activities, I don't think it would be very successful. That's besides the point a little bit, but it's just like kind of interesting to hear how that all played out. And then it sounds like you came across this other group. I missed the name, but they basically facilitated what then went on to be Alex Coin, which kind of sat dormant for a bit until you went and marketed it on stage to some degree.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it wasn't very known for a while, and then marketed it on stage, raised $20,000, and so this was marketed by the media as the first personal IPO, which is fair, I guess. And this was really cool. And this is when I thought, wow, like at first I thought that the Alex token was a means to an end. Like I want to become a founder. I want to build a real product in the Bay Area, and I want to move to SF properly this time, not just a few months. And yeah, like it ended up doing so well that I thought I might continue doing experiments and on the side still search for co-founders and like try ideas and things like this. And so this is like the 6 months after that, I've done some other Alex experiments that went well. And I've also like worked on some startups and some projects and just like trying to kick serendipity and see what my next thing could be.
When you went on stage and like, well, first before I get there, actually, when you went and actually created the Alex token, like we talked about earlier, like you don't have the coding background. How easy was that, or how difficult?
Well, so Roll is the company that actually issued the token for me. So actually, they pay for most transactions. Like they actually pay for gas on Ethereum, and they also issued my token. They even added liquidity on Uniswap on day one, like I think 10 ETH or 15 ETH. So it was like zero coding required.
So it was like they wanted you because you had this prior experience, and then obviously they basically facilitated the whole thing. It sounds like.
Yeah, they wanted me because it was like August something. I started tweeting maybe in June, July. I had like maybe 1,000 followers, and they were like, "Wow, we see that maybe you can become a valuable community member, and so you could use your community and like your token to um, you know do whatever you want with your community, incentivize them to do anything." And so, yeah, it was already starting to be clear that I would have maybe some followers on Twitter and like I was growing. And so when you have a small following, it's easier to have a token be successful. And I think at this point, they just wanted to try with anyone because it was so early on. And they still do to some extent. Like they're not very restrictive because crypto is still extremely early. But yeah, like at the time they contacted me and I was like, why not say no to this? Like, of course I'm going to say yes and do my Alex token.
Yeah, and I might need to talk with you about getting in touch with them because it's an interesting idea for me too. And I'm at an early stage myself where, like you mentioned, you had like 1,000 followers. I only have a few hundred, but the podcast is going super well so far. And I've interviewed people like Vitalik and Roger Ver
Yeah,
and
that's
Pop
awesome.
and everything like that. So certainly trying to help bring some attention to the space and more than anything, like I've been talking in my personal life to a lot of people about Bitcoin. Is just like a nice foot in the door. And once you're interested in Bitcoin and you see the value appreciating a bit, you start to dig into more of like what Bitcoin is. And then like you learn about Ethereum and these different applications. And I think it's like to the point that you made earlier, it's like reasonable to dig pretty deep into a lot of this without needing the technical background. You can kind of understand a lot of it conceptually and the possibilities for like certain businesses with crypto applications and things like that.
100%. And especially for podcasts, actually, I would say, especially the passion economy, the creator economy that is rising on the internet is often super under monetized. And so podcasts have a lot of listening time, but compared to other forms of media, it monetizes way less. And so if you could have something where, I don't know, maybe like a VIP podcast episode needs to uh, like have someone hold a certain amount of tokens to unlock that podcast, that would be great. Um, and so there could be some fun dynamics to really own the financial layer of whatever good that you produce. And so I believe that, yeah, for podcasters, for newsletters as well, this could be very helpful to monetize, and not even just monetize, just also engage your community more, because if you refer a great guest you can get some tokens or things like this. So super happy to help you do your token as well.
Yeah, and I think it's further to that, I think that's a great point. And like further to it, the exciting thing about crypto for me, and again, reharping on what you said with like the computer analogy, that it just we need to find what it's useful for. And I think from my perspective, um, I'm actually like not that deep in a lot of like the DeFi, and I don't care too much about like strictly financial applications. I understand some of them are very meaningful, and like Bitcoin is super exciting to me as a digital store of value. I'm heavily invested in it, and I have investments across the board as well. But like I was, I started my career in investment banking and finance, but it's never been like a huge interest of me just to do like a bunch of financial engineering. Like money's just
Mm,
money at the end of the day. It's like, what are we actually
yeah.
making? And I think what's interesting for me about crypto in the long run is that I think it's an extraordinary opportunity and a new, like you said, like it enables a new business model that can all at once um, kind of decentralize power or democratize maybe power. Like you look at Facebook and like Mark Zuckerberg has an insane amount of power being head of Facebook and the majority or at least the largest shareholder. So you're spreading some of that power with crypto with these voting schemes based on token ownership and things like that. And at the maybe even as or more exciting is the fact that you can also distribute value like among the network. So Zuckerberg got super rich off Facebook, but I didn't get rich off Facebook by having it. I didn't make any money off Facebook by having it when I was
Yeah.
in eighth grade or freshman year or whatever it was. And Uber is like another example.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that all of, if anything, the last couple of decades have been all about these network effects businesses. But the
Mhm.
only people who are getting paid are the people who are in charge, not even really even the employees in a lot of cases. It's just like the founders and the investors and whatever it might be. And through crypto, I think there's a tremendous opportunity to distribute that value to, if you're an early listener of my podcast and you accumulate tokens, all of a sudden you can be invested in my success. Um, and that's just one example, but is that sort of along the lines of how you think about different crypto applications within business?
100%. I think we align on many points here. So first one, yes, I am not either a finance geek, and I'm excited about not DeFi. I mean, I love DeFi, of course. I've been in this space for a year, and this was all about DeFi, so I loved it. But yeah, like the social consumer aspect is huge. I think the fact that crypto have can allow for a better wealth distribution in the world is amazing. And yes, Facebook and Uber value comes from a ton of their users, especially like the drivers or like the Facebook content uploaders and things like this. And those people have not been rewarded. And I don't really blame Facebook or Uber because the equivalent would be to drop equity to those people. And it's extremely hard to do. But we are seeing the early stages in the crypto space of companies doing token, airdrops to users like Uniswap. Uniswap just gave 60% of their tokens to their users, and I was one of them. And it's insane. Like in the equity-based world, it's like if a startup, it's like if Facebook IPO'd, and during their IPO, they would give 60% of the equity, like the majority of the shares to their users. It's unheard of, but I think this will be the case for the years to come, and that's fascinating. So yeah, 100%. I think all the network effects driven company, all the gig economy startups will be disrupted or will disrupt themselves by having a token and distributing it to people. And it's actually better. They will be better off. It's not like, oh, the founders won't be billionaires anymore. They will. And actually the growth will be even bigger because, Web2 like PayPal or Uber, like their model of growth hacking was, like add more friends or refer your friend and get $5 back. But when you give equity to someone, that's the most powerful thing ever. They will be aligned with you for their lifetime. So this actually will make growth of consumer startups extremely, extremely fast, faster than we've ever seen.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's important what you said. Like, I didn't mean to make Zuckerberg or anyone out to be like bad or evil in any way.
Right.
Like, no moral judgment. It's just something that wasn't really feasible, practical, or
Yeah.
possible. And now that it is, I think it's one of those things where, an example doesn't come right to mind, but in technology in general, things, people, middle class person's life today, they have access to a lot more things than like the King of France 500 years ago. Not
Yeah, 100%.
necessarily, not like necessarily in all dimensions, like money or
Yeah, yeah.
whatever else it might be. But
The
uh, the
healthcare or
yeah, the King of France couldn't watch Netflix.
right.
So like there's certain things, or take a helicopter or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that now that the technology and the structure that crypto will enable will, take something that previously wasn't possible and make it eventually the expectation, not for every business, but for these businesses that, like, Facebook would not be what it is without the people. Uber would not be what it is without the drivers. They're absolutely critical to the network effect of the business and the success of the business. And, they do, in my, from my perspective, now that it's enabled, I don't see any reason they shouldn't be rewarded by the upside in the company. And to your point, it should create, everyone involved with the company will have much more incentive because of their ownership. And so, like, you won't have an Uber driver probably, taking turns with Lyft if they only have Uber tokens. Like, they want to bring everyone on Uber. So I think it's a really interesting point. Going back to Alex, your token, I want to talk about, like, so you started with, you had this kind of surprise, you owe me money and I'm going to distribute it and you'll pay people 10% interest in a year, that structure, to more of like an ISA, income share agreement, which is also a really interesting development that I was thinking of a few years ago as well, that I guess at the same time, the best example I'm aware of is like Lambda School, and Austin Allred was working on that probably around that time as well. And now it's having a pretty good success, and certainly becoming more popular as a concept. How did you arrive at like the ISA, and how did that structure kind of work out for you with the coin?
So I think the reason why I picked ISA for the Alex token was that, like, I come from like the startup world. Like, I tried to start up before. I'm really fascinated by, the tech founders, Bay Area, venture-backed startup scene. And ISAs have been really, really hot the past few years. And no one had bridged it with crypto. Like, I met with this amazing person called James Gallagher, who did, like, I think he was the first publicly traded person at 16 or 17. He's close with Eric Thornburg, which is very known in the Bay Area. And so I was just like, I was asking those people, like, do you care about crypto? Do you know that crypto makes this process extremely easy? And they were always like, oh no, like, I don't want to like mix two emergent technologies together. Like, ISA aren't proven, crypto isn't proven. I don't really know. And so it did feel like I was the best positioned person that understood both worlds, because in crypto, there's a lot of people which are not in the startup world. They're in the open source software world, and they're excited about decentralization and not really like what is new in technology and startups. And so I felt like it was a nice way to bridge both worlds together. And this is where it's like, it just embodies the fact that I come from the startup world and the crypto world, and no one else really was into both, I think, at the time.
Yeah, I think there's certainly something to be said for like combining these two. The one person viewed it as a weakness to combine two emerging technologies, but I think that's like a huge, tremendous strength, and it's awesome that you were able to not only recognize that but then execute it. Obviously, it was extremely successful. You tweeted about it and things like that. You mentioned you had like 1,000 followers or whatever it was, but it didn't really take off until you went on stage and talked about it at the event. People, especially like in COVID times where everyone's kind of separated, people are emphasizing like the importance of digital networks and the lack of importance in like where you are physically or who you're around physically. But you kind of saw the opposite of that to some extent. Is that right?
Totally right. So, well, to be honest, I would still say that it would have been successful without the conference, because the conference went pretty well. I got some great feedback. The conference was a way for me to test the market, like where people, because at the time, which is like super recently, right? It was 6 months ago, but at the time, there was not this micro bull market with like yield farming and everything with so many tokens. And so tokens were still a bit taboo. And so at the time I just wanted to see, like, would people find this okay ethically to do that? And it turned out that yes, because I was very genuine and I asked for $20,000. Anyways, so I believe that I would have done it without the conference, but the conference was useful to
Jumpstart it
test.
a little bit.
yeah, get started. And the conference prior, I founded Marketing DAO, which is like a marketing entity for Ethereum, and it got support from Consensus, and it was awesome. And so I started because of this event a few months prior, and of course, like the tweet that sent me to Berlin. So yeah, I would agree that conferences is amazing. And even today, Launch House, it's 19% in real life. We all got tested negative for COVID prior. But I would say that, yeah, in real life, events are amazing. And that I'm saying this, even though Twitter has like helped me so much, it is true that I am not short real life connections. I want to be in San Francisco because this is where physically the most interesting people I know are. And this is, I think, yeah, I am the case for physical conference for sure.
Yeah. So where are we now with like Alex Coin? You raised the 20 grand with the 3-year 15% agreement. Maybe actually before we get to like where it is now, was there any consideration around the timing and like percentage or the amount for that matter, any of these inputs? Because when I'd thought about ISAs previously, absent the crypto element, I had thought about it basically like you mentioned earlier, like the Teal Fellowship. I'd thought of it kind of in that regard, where people could, after college, basically receive $100,000 for 2 years or $50,000 for 2 years, and then agree to pay a small single-digit percentage of their income for something longer, like 30 years. And to me, that was like, okay, nice. That like gives you a nice 2-year runway to not really have to worry about, doing something
Right.
specific. You can start a company and raise money and set yourself up that way, or you can get a job and just take this pocket income, whatever you want. What was your thinking around like the different inputs, or was that something that the group that helped you kind of brought into the table?
So, I mean, the specifics of the ISA, I was not really sure. I think, so what I said is 15% of my income disbursed quarterly for 3 years, capped at $100,000. I would say that if I had to redo it, I would just decrease the cap because $100,000 is a lot. But there was not much thought into it. I think it's very similar to what Lambda School is doing. I think Lambda School is capped at $50,000 and for 2 years. But at the time, I was not really financially doing well. And I just thought like, let's do something quite generous, and, this would help me anyway. And I think, yeah, it's fine. I think it's actually a very good deal for any of the 30 people that participated in the sale. Like, they will more than break even. They will make profit, and that's awesome because they've helped me greatly by doing this. So, but yeah, there was not much thoughts into it because I just didn't know it would be that successful. I didn't know if I would actually raise the entire $20,000. And now in hindsight, I think I could have raised more.
Yeah, and from outside looking in, it certainly seems that way. And you probably could have had, more control over the terms, but it does, nothing stops you from my perspective from doing another coin, whether it's, maybe you wait until after this one, the periods run out, or you do it and it's on top of it or separately from it. But when you talk about income, like another more of just like a logistical question, does that include like investing appreciation as well, or strictly like getting paid for doing jobs or having a company and making revenue and stuff like that?
That's a great question because my financial life is very weird. And so at the time, I was scared because I thought I was not making money at the time. And I was like, I have no clue if in 3 months, because I don't want to take a job. I want to be a founder, and those $20,000 will further not make me need any job. So I had no income guarantee whatsoever. But I did do a gig. I did help a YC founder. And so I got some sources of income the first 3 months. And yes, I did count actually the speculation of basically like the $20,000 was in ETH, and ETH was pretty low at the time. It did go up. And so I said, okay, cool. Like, I'm going to give 15% of the value that accrued from ETH, but just this one time, because then I don't know, like I kind of counted as my treasury, but it's done pretty subjectively because there is no like objective metric.
Yeah,
There's no objective.
Authority.
Yeah, exactly. There's no objective metric of what exactly is my income. It's not trustless on chain, like every time I get an income, like 50% goes to that pool. It's not like this. It's like completely subjective, and like people have to trust me to do this job well. And actually, I just distributed my second quarter 3 days ago, and this time I did not really make any income in real cash, but I did in tokens. And so I didn't really know what to do because some of the tokens in crypto are pretty illiquid. They are vested over a long time. And so I said a few days ago, okay, now my metric is going to be how much cash did I withdraw to live? And so I checked my bank statement of like how much cash went in from crypto tokens, and I took 15% off and given that to the 30 holders.
Yeah, I think I mean, obviously, anytime you're pioneering something so new and interesting, there's going to be bumps and learnings along the way. But it seems like next time, thought on the amount and the percentage and the duration and everything could be useful. But even more than that, almost, it sounds like defining, being very clear and transparent with the people who are going to come in as to what they're going to receive would be helpful, because like, I personally not having any interest in this situation whatsoever between you and the people invested with, or the holders of Alex token. It seems to me that like your appreciation from your investments on certain tokens, and it's not, I don't consider that income for the purpose of like the way that you make coin. I would like define income probably as like, first and foremost from a job, like whether it's salary or wages or whatever. And then secondarily, since you're a founder, it might be a little trickier, but like they shouldn't be taking money off the top of like the company's revenue. But at the same time, if you're paying yourself a salary or whatever it might be, then maybe they realize something from that. But that's why I think also like, everything all the elements play with each other, and making it a longer duration also could be helpful, where like, in a 2-year, 3-year time period, 1-year time period, whatever it might be, it's pretty easy for you to like avoid making income and then just kind of take the 20K and they're like, all right, like, what are we doing? But over a longer time horizon, like you're probably going to want to make income besides just your investments, and then they can realize like still a very large upside. So it's interesting to hear that perspective and like how it's gone so far, but totally kudos for being the first one to try it. So further to that, like, are other people trying it now, or what are you seeing related from what you've done?
Yeah, sure. I'm seeing a ton of people trying it now. So the history is, I did it. And then 2 weeks later, someone I know from the space called Cameron Coley replicated my sale, also raised $20,000. But this time he said, like, the income will be a little bit more predictable and like defined, because it says newsletter income. He's like an engineer. He writes like a technical newsletter on what happened in crypto. And so, so he did it just after me, and we're kind of like in the same buckets. Like we were called like the pioneers of this social token, and that's really cool. And I wish the best for Kerman. So after he did it, then a few other people did it, which were more community focused. So there is Karma, which is a group chat by Andrew Lee, which I've known since my start in crypto, which is a group for like people to invest and like do angel investing in crypto startups. Then there was Jam, which is a newsletter collective by Brian Flynn, which is an ex-Dapper Labs employee who now has a company called Rabbit Hole. And so there's been the rise of community tokens that's just more than one person. And also we've seen artists do it. So RAC, the Grammy-winning award artist, did a token that he would give out to Patreon subscribers. And that's an amazing incentive, because now his Patreon subscribers are going to pay more, people are going to literally subscribe to his Patreon because they want selfishly to get the tokens. And so that way he monetized his Patreon more, and the fans have more perks, and now they are more engaged. So I would say communities have started doing it, creators of all kinds, whether it's artists, newsletter writers, and maybe soon podcasters as well. And also even Blah, which is like a quite famous DJ that I know, also is spending his own token. So I would say that it seems, and I did not expect this because I was like the use case for like founder, like return on investment, like pre-seed round kind of deal. But it seems like it's been mostly adopted by creators and influencers. And actually in Launch House, I'm helping two YouTubers that are actually crushing it, and they would like to use token incentives to reward their fans and things like this. So like short term, this is what I've seen. It's like creators, YouTubers, influencers, artists of all kinds did that token to engage their fan base more and monetize more.
Yeah, it's interesting the different angles that people are taking. Like you mentioned, Blau I had on the show a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about how I don't know
Nice.
if he's doing his own for his personal, but he mentioned that for his next album, he's going to have the ability for fans to basically take a piece of ownership that
Nice.
they'll get appreciation if the album does well and everything like that. But yeah, man, I know we're coming up on the end of the hour that I scheduled, but it's been really fun talking with you and super interesting stuff. Obviously, the both of us are still young by my perspective, at least.
For sure.
And so, I think there's a lot of bright things ahead for you. And
Actually, on that note, which is very funny, it's that like one thing for sure is that people in the blockchain industry are going to end up pretty wealthy, and a lot of them are interested in longevity. So hopefully this boosts longevity and we'll all live longer. Anyway,
yeah, no, it's a theme of the podcast as well. My first episode was with
nice.
Aubrey de Grey, who's basically the pioneer for reversing aging. So
Awesome.
no stranger to that type of stuff. It's like if we're gonna be rich, we might as well live forever, right? So
Yeah. Cool. That's great. Thank you so much.
yeah, thank you. Before we wrap up, I want to give you the last word. Can you tell people where to follow you and follow some of your progress in these areas?
You can follow me at Alex Masmej on Twitter, Masmej, for more updates about my next projects and what's next for the Alex token, etc. And yeah, super excited for your show, and I'll keep listening to the podcast episodes. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much, Jake.